Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Hi, and welcome to Straight Talk About God video. I'm Jack. Who is Melchizedek? Melchizedek. He's this mysterious guy in the Bible. He shows up twice, 3 verses in Genesis and another 3 verses in Hebrews, and nobody really knows who he was. He just there and not there. Boom. Okay, we're going to have to go real slow here, establish some groundwork. Considering God's overall plan for the earth and people, we can find some of the basic principles by which God will complete his plan. Right? In order for human beings, people, to participate in God's plan, we have to be in touch with God. Right? Okay, so recognizing him is one of the main principles, and another one is that we have to allow God to work through us. Right? We have to give it up to God. Right? So this connection, we got to be connected with God somehow, is implemented through faithing. Faith with an ing on the end of it, because faith in the Bible, Old or New Testament, is a verb. It's an action. The word faith, pistis or pistuo, depending on the suffix, the root is pist, comes directly, it's derived directly from a primary verb. And while I'm at it, believe or belief or any of those words are derived directly from the word for faith. It has exactly the same root. It just has a different suffix. So believe and faith are both verbs. So we have to put an ing on it, because we don't have a verb faith in English. Our faith is belief. Hey, what faith are you? Keep the faith. But if you do a deep study back into Old English, you'll find that the th on faith isn't part of the word. The root is the fai part, which was spelled different ways back then. That's the root, and the th makes it it makes it an action word. Excuse me. Okay, well, one of the clearest ways to faith, F-A-I-T-H-E, faith, in the Bible is communion. Communion. Well, see, communion is an action. You're doing something, taking the bread and eating the bread and drinking the wine. It's an action, and it's based on something God, through Jesus, at the Last Supper, has said. He said, do this, right? So, and it's taken in spite of any negative circumstances that we might see, like us not being worthy, the risk of embarrassment if somebody happens to be there and says, hey, what are you doing? Negative circumstances is always involved. There's always a bit of the unknown involved in faithing. Otherwise, it's not faithing, because faithing is basically trusting God for something. And if you already know about it, you don't have to trust God, right? It's the unknown that we want to hesitate. And, well, I didn't want to do that. I might not be popular. Okay? But again, it's one of the things that Jesus commands us to do. Right? Do this in remembrance of me. Do it. Right? Okay. Well, how is God going to accomplish his goal with people, using people? Well, the people are to work together to disseminate the word of God's plan, right? We're not going to get into the God's plan this time. It's just about Melchizedek. A chosen few, the domata, gift ministers, will be the leaders, okay, of the movement, and the followers will also work their little part and put their contribution into the movement, getting the word out concerning God's goal. Okay? So we have three unsurpassed principles, the three main principles of the walk for God. Okay? See, the God walk is God is real, recognizing his reality, real. Salvation, through faithing, we're saved by faith, salvation, and participating in the work, giving, supporting the work. Okay? God is real. So you're recognizing God's sovereignty, faithing, and supporting the dissemination of God's word. So faithing, the second principle, is defined again as a trusting act defying negative circumstances based on something God has said, okay? Concerning the situation that we're involved in. A situation comes up and it says, you got to do something here. You can do it your way or you can do it God's way. Take your choice. If you do it God's way, you're going to go against those negative circumstances. Okay? That's faithing. Okay? Again, we're saved by faith. Faithing. Okay? The third principle, that's the supporting of the dissemination of the word. The Bible is very clear and repetitious about that. It says, pay the teacher. That's how you support the work. You add your own study to it, but you support those leaders, the people who are teaching. You can't teach yourself about God in the Bible. Just read the Bible and look up a couple of words. You can't teach yourself that. You got to have a teacher, okay? Somebody who has the time to spend hours and hours and hours of research to find out what really says there. See? If you've got that time and you happen to be a teacher, that's okay, you know, but you're going to still need a teacher. Teachers need teachers too. We're all in some degree a teacher, okay? Because the more you study, the more you know, the more the Holy Spirit brings somebody to ask you a question about the things you know, and you become the teacher about that particular thing, okay? That's how we participate. Now, I think that no more important principles in the walk of God can be found except more important than faithing and supporting. That's what the whole Bible is about, right? And I believe that God set a precedent for both of these principles in the story of Abram's meeting with Melchizedek. Okay? That's in Genesis 14. Okay? And we have to recognize, we'll get into this in detail a little bit later, but we have to recognize that Melchizedek is not his name. Okay? It's not his name, it's his title. His title. The king of Egypt, the Pharaoh of Egypt. Pharaoh isn't his name. His name might have been Frank, you know, but he's the king, the Pharaoh of Egypt. And Melchizedek, that's just his title, okay? It wasn't his name. His other title is the king of Salem, right? King of Salem. Paul says peace, but Salem is really Jerusalem. He's the king of Jerusalem. Okay? Well, the question arises. Why did God choose Abram? He's just walking around the desert one day and God said, hey, bud, I want you to do something for me. No, that isn't the way it happened. God doesn't work that way, right? I mean, Why didn't God choose his father? You know, he was older, and or his brothers. Why Abram? Eh? Well, God never works short term. Okay? Never works short term. I mean, he's got all of history, all of our physical history at one time available to him, right? And he works centuries and centuries down the line, right? So he didn't just play eeny, meeny, miny, mo with Abram, all right? He got Abram ready with the teaching he received from Noah and Shem. Huh? Noah and Shem taught Abram? I don't see any connection with that in the Bible. He was taught by, well, see, apocryphal literature, the book of Jasher mainly, he tells us that Abram spent 39 years living with Noah and Shem. Whoa, living with them, right? It says that when he was 10 years old, he went to live with Noah and Shem, and 39 years later, he came back home. He was there for 40 years with them, right? Josephus, he even tells us that when Abraham by that time, went to Egypt, he taught the Egyptians astronomy and science and stuff. He taught the Egyptians that. Whoa, he's a college professor, right? Where'd he learn all that? Where did Abram learn all that stuff? Huh? Astronomy, especially astronomy. Oh, well, he came from Ur, and they had astronomy in Ur. Yeah, they had astronomy in Sumer and Akkad and all that. You do the historical research on ancient Babylon, Sumer and Akkad, and they wind up with a full-blown science of astronomy right off the bat. Huh? Hey, the astronomy science takes centuries. You have to be able to observe the stars for centuries. They knew about the precession of the equinoxes. They dug up a tablet from over there that has the exact outline, the picture of the solar system with all of the planets in their proper orbits, distance from the sun, and relative sizes with one difference. There's 12 planets there. They knew about 12 planets instead of 11. See? Now the theory is that 12th planet got broken up and became the asteroid belt. But the point is that back there at 3000 BC, they knew that there was a planet called Pluto and Saturn and Uranus and, well, how did they find that out? Who told them that? You know? We don't even know that they had a telescope. See? Good question. Okay? So Abraham learned all that stuff from Noah and Shem, right? Who wrote down all of the stuff about astronomy that God dictated? It was Enoch. Enoch. He's called God's scribe, okay? And he wrote all that stuff down. Now, do you think that all the books that he wrote and the skins that God gave Adam and Eve and a bunch of other artifacts didn't go with Noah and Shem and his family through the flood on the ark? He didn't just load animals on that ark. He had all the books, okay? All right. The point is that for that 39 years that Abram spent with Noah and Shem, they weren't all out on the back deck playing pinochle, okay? Okay? And almost the day that Abram comes back, after he's living with them, he's almost 50 now, the day he comes back, God says, okay, leave, leave everything, leave your house, your home, leave your family, only take your wife and your servants and go where I will tell you. He didn't even tell him where he was going to go. He said, just get out of there. Keep going. Okay? Well, he didn't obey. He left the house. He left his family, except for his nephew Lot. Took him with him, and his father. But he did leave. And then he traveled. But where did he travel? He went over to some of his other family members over in Haran. And he spent 25 years over there. See? Till his father died. And he said, well, okay. And then he got on the camel and started back down to the Holy Land again. And God said, here's the place. Okay? Well, when he gets there, after a little while, there's a war. Some kings come down, and they conquer Sodom and Gomorrah and a few other places there, and they carry everybody and everything of value away. Boom. Well, Abram, that included Lot, Abram's nephew. Abram gets a little army together, only 318 people. 318. His servants and stuff. See, he's a rich guy. Okay? He gets them together. He goes and he beats up on the bad guys and brings everybody and everything back. Great. And the king's there. They say, whoa, oh, here, take all this because you're such a good... He said, no, I'm not going to let you say that you made me rich. I don't want any of that. Okay? But as soon as he gets back there, out of the blue, boom, this guy shows up, Melchizedek. He shows up. Wait a minute, Melchizedek. See? Again, his name, okay? The Melchi part of the name means king. Melchi is king. And Zedek means righteousness. He's the king of righteousness. That's his title, okay? King of righteousness. Also, the king of Salem. The king of, well, it could be peace. Salem could be peace, but it was Jerusalem. It was Jerusalem, okay? King of Jerusalem, king of peace, king of righteousness. If he was the king of Jerusalem, that's probably where he came from, okay? Did Josephus? Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Where was Abram in relation to Jerusalem? Well, wow, the Dead Sea is in there. Jerusalem is over here on the west side of the Dead Sea, and the place where they were way down here on the other side. He has to go up around the top of the Dead Sea and down along the valley until he gets to the Valley of the Kings. 60 miles. They say that walking speed is 3 miles an hour. How long does it take you to walk 60 miles? 20 hours. It was probably a 2-day trip. He's got a camel train full of stuff because, let me see here, with Josephus. Josephus says he brought all kinds of stuff with him. You know, he didn't, way more than what it says in the Bible. He brought all kinds of fruit and wine and all this stuff, you know, to feed Abram's little army, right? But the Bible, he doesn't say anything about that. The Bible just says he brought bread and wine. Remember? Bread and wine. Here, wait. Let me read that to you. This is Genesis 14, okay? Genesis 14, 17 through 20. Okay. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him, Abram, after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him in the valley of Sheva, which is the king's dale, the valley of the kings. Okay? And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was a priest of the Most High God. Okay? 19. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. Great recognition of God and his help. Okay? And Abram, he gave him tithes of all. Tithes. Multiple tithes of all. Abram gives Melchizedek tithes. That's all. No more. End of story. Well, who is this Melchizedek guy? And how did he know about Abram? He's over there in Jerusalem. Well, if he's the priest of the Most High God, God could come to him and say, hey, Abram needs your help over here. Bring him some food and stuff, and he's going to be over there. He'll show up about April 14th, and you just get over there. Okay? He shows up after a 60-mile trip, and out of the blue. Bloom. Okay? Well, with such a close connection to God, being a priest of the Most High God, it's reasonable to assume that God told Melchizedek about what was going on with Abram. And God told Melchizedek to bring Abram food. Why? I mean, again, Abram was rich. Okay, he wasn't just a back-of-the-desert guy with 20 or 30 sheep. He had 318 people that he could get together as an army. Not much of an army, but, he beat 4 kings in the army. Abraham had all the food he needed. He was rich. And maybe that's why the Bible doesn't bother with that. Again, he didn't take anything from the kings when they offered him money. Okay? Now, I have to interject here that what we have to do to really make sense out of this, and this is what you have to do with all of your study, the Bible, okay? I don't care how big or small the story is. God put that story in there. He included that particular part of the story for a reason. Okay? Not just to tell you somebody's name or what day it was. He had a reason to say that. Okay? Well, what was the message in this little 3-verse encounter between Melchizedek and Abram? What's God saying in there? Not what Abram is doing, not what Melchizedek is doing. What's God showing us? Okay? Only 3 things happen at the meeting. Right? Only 3 things. Recognition of God's hand, okay, in the process, the bread and the wine, and tithing. Boom. Well, those are our 3 principles. Our 3 main principles in the walk with God and God's plan, right? God is real, recognition of God. God is real. Huh? Bread and wine, that has to be communion, doesn't it? It has to be communion. That's why he left out all the food. He just put in there bread and wine to show us communion. Faithing. Faithing. Okay? God is real, faithing, and tithing, giving. There they are, huh? Why did God send Melchizedek to meet Abram? It wasn't to bring his men a snack, okay? If God chose to include only the bread and the wine being brought by Melchizedek, he was teaching us something, okay? And it's obviously, again, the first type of communion in the Bible, okay? I'm sure that there's a lot of Christians who thought about that at least. A few might have even been taught, I mean, it's just such a short little passage that you just brush over that and, it's not worth getting into. It's all worth getting into, isn't it? Okay? Well, what about the tithes that Abram paid to Melchizedek? Oh, he paid him tithe. What's God teaching about that? What did God teach through the whole rest of the Bible, Old and New Testament, about giving and tithing, right? Tithing. See? I mean, it would definitely imply that Melchizedek was Abram's teacher in God things, okay? It would also imply that it wasn't their first meeting if he was his teacher, see? And this conclusion can be reached only by applying those three principles of God's walk. God is real, faithing, and pay the teacher. Okay? Well, who was Abraham's teacher then? Was Melchizedek his teacher? We don't know anything about that. We just know that this guy from 60 miles away shows up with bread and wine. Huh? Was he his teacher? I mean, like I said, the Bible doesn't say, but Jasher does talk about Melchizedek. See? Melchizedek's name in Jasher is Adonai-Zedek. Adonai-Zedek. Now, I'm sure you recognize the word Adonai, you know. That's the pronunciation that was used by the Jews so they wouldn't blaspheme God and say his real name, Jehovah. Adonai. Lord means Lord, okay? Lord of Zedek, righteousness. Lord of righteousness. It also says, like the Bible, King of Salem, which is Jerusalem. But then it says, Adonai-Zedek, the same was Shem. Shem. Well, of course, if Abraham spent 39 years with Shem and Noah, learning about God, learning enough about all of the things that God told Enoch, and he wrote down in all the books and everything, that's how he knew about all astronomy and math and science and stuff, and he taught the Egyptians. That's where it came from. Shem is Abram's teacher. Lord of Adonai and Nereviah goes, same was Shem. Now I know there's a lot of theories about Melchizedek, who he was. There's as many theories as there are people talking about it, okay? And the deeper you go, the more confused you'll get. Well, it could have been him, you know. Well, no, he wasn't only mentioned until the 3rd century BC. Oh, well, it can't be Shem. The only answer that fits in God's plan is that Melchizedek was Shem. It's the only thing where you can fit that piece in there and say, oh, communion, giving. And then from then on, all of the things about communion and giving are the same. Jesus does communion. Communion isn't communion. This is the first communion in the Bible. The second communion in the Bible is the Passover, the blood and the lamb, which Jesus says, the blood is mine, the lamb is my body. Okay? Where are we here? I don't think that Abram would tithe to a total stranger, which is what Abraham, what Melchizedek looks like. You know, he just shows up. You know, and it doesn't even say that he said to Abram, I'm a priest of the Most High God. See? Somebody who wrote Genesis said he was a priest of the Most High God. He's a stranger. They aren't just ships passing in the night. Oh, by the way, here's a tenth of all the stuff that I've got. What? No. See? Melchizedek knew Abram. And Abram knew Melchizedek because he was Shem, right? Okay? Abram's teacher would, of course, bring him communion, right? Communion. Abram, tithing to his teacher, sets the model. It's the way it's supposed to be. It's the way God has it set up. See, the tithes. Who got the tithes in the rest of the whole Bible? Who got the tithes? Levites, Aaron and his priesthood. Nobody from the tribe of Judah got tithes. Nobody from the tribe of Asher or Gad or it was always the Levites. Why? Why they were the keeper of God's word. They were the teachers of God for the rest of the tribes. Their job was to be in the temple, study God, know God's ways, and be able to pass that knowledge on to everybody else. They're the teachers. You pay your tithe to the teachers. And then Paul, he admonishes in all of his letters but one. All of them but one. I think that's Timothy because he's writing to a specific person. All but one, he says, pay the teacher. Somehow pay the teacher. He goes on about it. He doesn't just say, well, pay the teacher. He goes on about it. There's 2 hours worth of video just on Paul paying the teacher, okay? Melchizedek was Shem, but just very quickly, go to Hebrews chapter 6. Is it chapter 6? No, it's chapter 7. Chapter 7. And we got another 3 verses there. Oh, he's mentioned at the end of chapter 6. The word Melchizedek is in there, okay? But then he talks about who Melchizedek was, okay? Let me read that to you. Hebrews 7, 1 through 3. For this Melchizedek, the king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham, was actually Abraham, returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abram gave a 10th part of all, first being by interpretation, king of righteousness. See, that's not his name, it's his title, king of righteousness. And after that, king of Salem, which is king of peace. But Jasher says that Salem is Jerusalem. It was called Salem, okay? In fact, if you do some deep study on Shem, you find out that he went to Egypt, conquered Ham, set things straight over there, and instituted the monotheistic religion, and after some years went away and founded Jerusalem. Only it was called Salem at the time. This is the hard part, without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning or days of days, nor end of life. Well, that allows you to figure anybody to be Melchizedek. Oh, it was an angel. Angels don't have mothers and fathers. No, it was Christ. It was Christ. Oh, yeah, Christ doesn't have a mother and father. At that time, because he wasn't the Christophany. Okay? Oh, well, it was some unknown priest. There's all kinds of theories about who it was because of no father, no mother, blah. But then it goes on to say, and this throws half of the theories out the window. But made, that's putting things together that already exist. Not creating, made, like, and the word like is similar in Hebrew, similar unto the Son of God. Oh, it was a person who is like the Son of God, but it isn't the Son of God, so it can't be a Christophany. It can't be Jesus at that time before he was a human being. Okay? Made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. Well, if you only look at those 3 verses, and you know the general story of Melchizedek in Genesis, you're going to come up with whatever you decide instead of what Paul was talking about, because you got to put those 3 verses in the context of chapter 6 and chapter 7. Who's Paul talking to? Hebrews, right? It's in Hebrews. He's talking to the Jews. And who are the Jews responsible to? The priesthood. Who is the priesthood? The tribe of Levi. Only the tribe of Levi. And Paul is making the case that Jesus is not of the tribe of Levi. He's the Messiah, but he's not like Aaron, and yet he's a priest of the Most High God. He's the top priest of God, under God, right? But he's not. He's the line of Judah. Okay, so you take those three verses and put them into that context, and then you got a man who is made a priest by God, and wasn't even in a gleam in Abraham's eye, because the Levites didn't come out till 3 generations later. I got some notes here, right? Okay, Melchizedek wasn't Christ. That's because of the out of context thing. Got it? And Paul, again, is highlighting the difference between Christ and the temple priests, and saying that we got a new priest now. We don't need that old priest anymore. We've got a new priest, like Melchizedek was a priest, not out of the line of Levi, right? And he's only using Melchizedek to show that idea. And even though we know nothing about him, we don't have any lineage listed for him. We don't know who his mother and father were. Not that he didn't have one. We don't know how old he was, when he was born, when he died. We don't know any of that from what it says in the Genesis account. It doesn't mean he didn't have a father and mother. Jasher says it was Shem. And it has to fit that principle of communion and giving to the teacher. It has to. God doesn't change, right? And he wouldn't tell us throughout the whole book. Dr. Scott used to say that God talks about giving more than heaven. Okay? Melchizedek was Shem, right? Okay, thanks a lot for watching. God bless.